Top of the Sunday to you. Welcome. We are in the last lesson in the book, actually. And so today and Wednesday, we'll be discussing Scientology. And I will say this is one of the most interesting things I've ever looked into in my entire life. I'm going to be up front and tell you, chances are you probably won't run into many Scientologists around here. There's a chance that you might, but typically more so along bigger cities and that sort of thing. And so, the question comes up: well, what's the point? Why would we even spend our time? I think Scientology is actually a really good study on just the human mind and how people are drawn to different things. Once you look into some of the beliefs and viewpoints of Scientology, it becomes quickly apparent that there's some out there things, and you wonder, how do people get drawn into this? How does this affect people? Why do people go for this sort of thing? And I think it helps us to see why people go for anything and why people believe what they do. So I think that'll be something to think about as we go through this. And once again, as I've discussed with many of these religions, when we look at the leadership and we compare that to the people who are actually in the streets, living their life day to day, I think you're going to find vastly different viewpoints, ideas, and what they do. But before we start this, I think it would be good if we could pray. Luke, would you care to lead us in a prayer? Amen. Awesome. So, Church of Scientology is actually, like what it says here, an umbrella term that covers several different branches. I think they're somewhere in the ballpark of 20 or so, what you would consider to be part of the Church of Scientology. And they're really big into abbreviations. I don't know why this is, but they do. Church of Scientology would be C of S. Their leader, L. Ron Hubbard, they refer to him as LRH. And so sometimes when you hear people talking, they'll just be like LRH. There's all kinds of different abbreviations that they use. Like that is a thing that they do. And again, I don't know why, but it's just where it is. All right. There are a lot of things that have happened in the Church of Scientology that you've probably heard of in the news. There's different documentaries, different interviews, a lot of stuff that you may have heard. I don't know how much of that you guys have heard, paid attention to, listened to, but it's interesting. This second paragraph here, normally I don't like statements like this, to be honest. But I do think this is fitting for this group. I really do. And so I want to read this second paragraph. The Church of Scientology is a vicious and dangerous cult that masquerades as a religion. Its purpose is to make money. It practices a variety of mind control techniques on people lured in its midst to gain control over their money and their lives. Its aim is to take from them every penny that they have and can ever borrow, and also to enslave them to further its wicked ends. That seems pretty spicy. That is a description that, you don't want to be grouped into that. But it's honestly pretty accurate. Once you look into it and you see what people have gone through, any kind of interview of someone who has left the church, especially someone who is higher level, that you find out a lot that will just make your skin crawl. One thing that I think we know is Scientology is there's a big pull for celebrities. Who is the most famous celebrity who's a Scientologist? Tom Cruise. I mean, yeah, there it is. And he's kind of the face of Scientology in a lot of ways. Anybody know the name of the current leader, the current president? Or Yeah. David Miscavige. And yeah, he took over after L. Ron Hubbard died. Which, by the way, when after LRH died, David Miscavige, when he took over, he was talking about how LRH is still active and he's still writing and he's still publishing. He's just not encumbered to his physical form anymore. And so that was interesting. Anyways, there is a big push for celebrities. And you could think of why this would be a thing if you could get celebrities in and get people who are important, that other people will look to them as sort of like a leader, as a guide. And that's definitely true. Tom Cruise is sort of the biggest name there. John Travolta, that's kind of a big deal. And when you think about why these people have stayed with it and all that sort of thing, I think it's one of those things where, especially if there's an actor or actress who is early on in their career, and you think about what kind of environment Hollywood is, and trying to make it and try to break through. If you have no support system and you're kind of on your own, you might not get very far. I mean, how many people, young, struggling actors or actresses are trying to, make a name for themselves and get somewhere? Well, what happens is the Church of Scientology is able to step in and sort of take them under their wing and say, I'll help you out here. I'll show you how to be more confident. I'll show you how to be more marketable or whatever, and they'll help them along the way. And then after a certain point, and this definitely happened with John Travolta, you get to this level where you have popularity, you have fame, and then you wouldn't want to turn your back on the thing that got you to where you are. And I think that's one of the big draws of that. Okay, Church of Scientology, I think, is still forbidden in Germany. I'm not 100% sure on that. There was thoughts of trying to get there. There are some branches in Canada, Spain, and France, so it's sort of spread out. Major headquarters in the U.S., I think, is still Clearwater, Florida. They have the big temple, the Church of... Yeah. It's blue, and it's sort of like I don't know like a half hexagon or something. Anyways, it's that, and it has that like a pyramid type thing with the cross on top. But the cross is not the cross that we would. It's here in the symbols. It is the 8-pointed cross, which is really interesting that they use that. And I think one reason that they have that is because they try to draw people into their religion. But they will tell you sort of above the symbol paragraph. So the paragraph above where it says symbol, this is, they tell you when you first start that you can go to any church you want. You could have whatever beliefs you want. Scientology doesn't interfere with your beliefs. You can come and you can do this, and see, we have a cross here, but it's not the same, and there are different things to look at with that. Any questions, comments, things that you want to bring up to that point? Yeah, come. Mm-hmm. So those 8 dynamics of existence, you have, and it kind of starts with self. And then you go through all the levels to where you finally get to, so like dynamic number 1 is self. Dynamic number 2 it's called sex and family. So it's like the family unit. And so first dynamic is you are self-preservation. You're making sure you have what you need. Second is family, and you're involved with family. Third is group, and so you have, whatever groups you're a part of. Fourth is mankind, so humans in general. Fifth is the animal kingdom, so we're all part of something that's interrelated throughout the world. Sixth is the universe, and so there's an acronym, MEST, MEST, matter, energy, space, time. And that's sort of like everything that exists, everything in the physical universe. Then 7th is spiritual, and so anything that is spirit. And then 8 is infinity, aka God. And we're going to see they have a different viewpoint. Kind of believe what you want about God. But there's some kind of overall force that holds everything together. So it's in the dynamics, what they're doing is they're trying to show, we have all of your life figured out. And so if we can help you in all of these areas, and that's kind of, why are people drawn to Scientology? Why? Because it has answers for these things. And you think about when someone just coming across that, it kind of makes sense that we start with the self and we end up eventually with this great life force, infinity, with God, and there's all kinds of stuff along those lines. It's as far as I know about that. Yeah. So the symbols, you do have the cross with the little X on it, and so it's like the 8-pointed cross, and those are the 8 dynamics. So it represents that. Another symbol is this little symbol for education, the S with the 2 triangles. And you have the upper triangle with KRC, knowledge, responsibility, and control. And the other one, the ARC, the arc triangle, affinity, reality, and communication. I listened to some, material. It was a video on YouTube put out by the Church of Scientology that was describing at least the ARC triangle. And it was talking about relationships and how to have better relationships with people. And they said, in this triangle, if any of these things, if you don't have an affinity with the person, if you don't meet, there's nothing you can talk about, so you don't have like a real connection. Or communication, you're just not able to speak or whatever. If any of those points of the triangle are out of whack, it sort of separates you from that person, and so the triangle expands, it gets bigger, and so you're not as close to that person. But when you can start making connections, even if it's in one area, you can get closer to the person and have better relationships. And this, I think, is one of the draws of Scientology, because people are all the time like, how can I have better relationships? How can I get along with people better? How can I do that? Well, think about this triangle, and it gets pretty in-depth as far as being able to read people, to understand their emotional level, understand the tone of their face, and be able to figure out how they're going to respond to things and how you should react and all that. I mean, there's just, if you think about it that way, there's a lot of appeal to that because people crave relationship. They crave a sense of belonging. And if they don't have it, especially if there's anything in their past that's sort of weighing them down, that they've had bad relationships with people or bad experiences, I mean, this is sort of the draw, like why people will go for that. And side note to the side note, there's a lot of things we could talk about with that. But when you think about that, I think our relationships with people, we need to do a better job. And we need to make sure people feel included and sense of belonging. Because if we are distancing ourselves from people, you can see why those type of people, those who feel marginalized or left out or excluded, why they would be more likely to be attracted to something like this, which is a sense of community, which is honestly how a lot of cults operate and how they work. Because you have this sense of belonging and trust, and you are connected to this group. And eventually, when you have those connections deep enough, once you start finding out some things that are kind of disturbing, you kind of make excuses for them. It's like, well, they welcome me in. It's a family, and I can put up with that. And maybe there's a greater good that's being served. There's a greater purpose, and so that's kind of how they get stuck. I read something. If you look on the website of the Church of Scientology, there's all kinds of like questions and then things that are answered. It's like, what's the nature of God, and what does sin look like, and what human existence, and all of those things. And I found a quote on one of these that was really interesting because it reminded me of something I saw this week. The quote was, "God helps those who help themselves." And that might seem familiar to some of you because I think we saw that recently. But that concept, that quote, they use that and say, well, we take that to the next level and we show you how to help yourself. And so it's interesting that they use something that actually wasn't from the Bible to like get a connection with people who are Christians, and then it's like take that to the next level. So I thought that was ironic. That was really cool. The history. Okay, here we go. So, L. Ron Hubbard. He is, I think he still holds the Guinness World Record for the most science fiction novels ever written. He got his money when he was younger, selling these like little short, I don't know if you call them novels, what you call them, but they got paid a penny per word. And so he would just crank out these science fiction works, and he would just, he would have a ton. And so he has the most published science fiction work. Keep in mind, I'm saying science fiction work. This guy was a, full-blown science fiction writer. He wrote several full-length novels. He wrote these short stories, and he has all kinds of stuff there. And if you've ever read any of his stuff, they're out there. It's definitely out there. But he was a science fiction writer, and there's a lot of debate about exactly what caused him to turn to religion. There's some quotes that have been attributed to him, and I haven't been able to really nail down if they are true from him or if he was using something else. People that were close to him says at least this seems pretty accurate with this guy. But he was quoted as saying something along the lines of, if you really want to make money, you should start a religion. And that was interesting. And he did. There's several things we could talk about with his past, his background. He did serve in the Navy, but don't think it turned out too well. He was kind of let go because of some choices he made. He was shooting at things that weren't there and causing some issues there. He claims to have some like major injuries from his time in the Navy, where he was able to heal himself of different things. The only thing on his record was like he had like pink eye one time or something. There was not very much there in his official record. Church of Scientology will say that his records have been fixed so that way that you can't see that. But anyways, he started investigating into a lot of different things. He was investigating into occult practices. There was a guy, Aleister Crowley, who was like the European like black magic type, and he was looked at as one of the most evil people on the face of the planet, and he was known to be trying to perform a ritual to not him give birth, but that the Antichrist would be born. And so he was trying to do that. He was really mixed up in a lot of stuff, did a lot of drugs. But L. Ron Hubbard was kind of close to him, and he studied under him. He developed some things from him. And he also was dabbling in, what's it called when you get hypnotism? Yeah. So hypnotism. And he was really big into that, thinking that being hypnotized that will help get rid of some of these bad thoughts, feelings, whatever. He was very much against psychology and psychiatry, and especially medications or anything. He's very adamant in saying that all of these psychological problems, that's not a real thing, and there are ways you can get through this. Like nobody should be medicated for any kind of psychological issues, depression, ADHD, bipolar, like any of these things. Those are just made up things, and he's really, really against that. And you'll see the Church of Scientology even today. There were interviews with Tom Cruise where he was talking about that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Very heated discussion with that. But here's what happened. He wrote this book called Dianetics. And Dianetics, with this book, he made some claims that he was able to help people through several things, through physical problems, blindness. He was able to raise people's IQ points. He was able to make them smarter. And there was a lot of really outlandish claims. And the way that this worked was through a technique called auditing. And this is still true for the church today. If you get introduced to Scientology, what you'll do, the very first thing, is this process. It's called auditing. And it's not just a one-time thing. You continue to do that throughout your time with the church. But auditing, what happens is it's called an e-meter. And what it is it's this thing you grab on. It looks like two aluminum cans. And it has some wires connected to this meter. And really, what it is 1/3 of a lie detector test. Because lie detector, you have the electrical thing that measures the electricity that's running through your body. Essentially, it measures the sweat on your skin. And so that's really what's going on here. It's measuring the amount of sweat that's coming out of your hands. But with lie detectors, you also have heart rate monitor and... there you go. Yeah, respiration. So it shows you your breathing rate, your heart rate, and the amount of sweat that's coming out. This one, it just measures the amount of sweat that's coming out of your hand. And what they say is anytime that you are speaking of something or anytime you have a thought that is negative, that's something that influences you, that impacts you in a big way, that when you are going through this auditing process, you're holding onto that meter, that the meter will kind of jump. And that jump, I think what they say is it's measuring the mass of your bad thoughts. And it jumps and it shows you, okay, there, whatever that was, let's talk about that some more. And what these sessions are, it's kind of like a counseling session where they tell you to repeatedly go through all of the details that you can on this one thing as deep as you can. And continually do that over and over again until you just are kind of numb to it. You don't have a response to it. It doesn't affect you anymore. And if you think about that, that could actually be an effective way of getting through some of those, especially if there's something like super traumatic that you've went through. The more you talk about it and the more you put a name to every detail that happened and you're going through all of that, you can see how that's kind of therapeutic and you get through. It's sort of the same mentality of it's like a confessional. You're getting it out there, and eventually the whole goal of Scientology is to get clear, and that is to clear your body, clear your mind of all negative thoughts, of getting rid of, and they call those engrams. I think it's the things that mental aberrations, unhappiness, and all of that. If you think about that, there's close relations in Scientology to Buddhism, Hinduism, and some other Eastern religions. And that's the thing with Buddhism was the search for how to get rid of suffering, right? And that's kind of the same mentality here. We're trying to get rid of all those, especially from early traumas. Now, the thing is, with an auditing session, after you go through literally all the things that you could remember about your life, they'll try to push you to remember things that happened in past lives. And sometimes they'll feed you some things to try to get you to think it. And then once you repeat those things, it kind of solidifies and it makes a memory that wasn't really there. So that does happen. Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. It is, yeah. They do every single word you say in one of these sessions. They keep track, and they have some massive files with everything you've ever said in one of these sessions. And if you try to leave, this is what happens. They have people who are dedicated just to sifting through all of your stuff to find blackmail-worthy material in order to, so, you speak out against the church, I have this on you. And yeah, and there's several examples of people who have turned people against them and talk to, well, I'll tell all your friends the terrible things that you've done, so they'll turn against you, and I mean, it's worked. So yeah, that's the scary thing about this. So yeah, these counseling sessions, it's designed to give you this feeling of like, okay, this works. And if this works, maybe I should trust what's going on here. And then it sort of gets you drawn in. Keep in mind, all of these sessions are not free. They cost money. And this is one thing that L. Ron Hubbard did. The bottom part of this, Hubbard kept adding steps, each more costly, for his followers to climb. And this is very true. There's so many different levels. To reach what is called OT3, and at this level, OT3, it's way up there. Usually it takes about 7 years to get to this point. And this is the point where you get some information that is just really mind-blowing. So at OT level 3, you have spent at least 7 years in the organization, probably, and you have spent somewhere in the ballpark over $100,000. That's how much it takes to get to that point. Once you get to that point, you learn. I said I was going to try to do this with a straight face, and I'm trying. The origin of life on the earth, and so let me read a little bit of that. Now, some of it is in your book, but I just thought this was really interesting. So, according to them, according to L. Ron Hubbard, 75 million years ago, there was the leader of the Galactic Federation. His name is Xenu. He was in charge of about 76 planets, and they had already existed for at least 20 million years. I've heard different numbers as far as that goes, but 20 million years at that point. The planets were suffering from a tremendous overpopulation problem, and so Xenu's solution was to gather a large number of people from different planets, and it was just like all these planets were heavily overpopulated. So he was like, here's my solution. I'm going to get it's kind of a Thanos solution. He grabs a lot of people, and he says, I'm going to kill them all. And so he freezes their essence. They call the spirit thetans. Thetans? Thetans. And thetans. They put these living things in a solution of glycol and alcohol to freeze them. And then they took all of those and put them in like a 1950s era airplane that had adjusted to burn rocket fuel to fly through space. And they took them to the planet Tigiath, which is the name for Earth. And they dropped all of these creatures into volcanoes around Hawaii. Then, through a series of atomic bombs, they had nuclear explosions that killed all of these alien life forms from the volcanoes. But as they were being killed, their thetans were like they started to separate from those bodies. And what they did is they had these massive things that would collect those spirits, and they would put all of those spirits in this huge room. It was kind of like a movie theater. And in that room, they would have kind of documentaries playing. So it would brainwash those spirits into believing in different religious beliefs. They would have some that were focused on Jesus and his example, some Buddha, some of these other religious leaders. And so that's where that came from. And now, today, when you are born, there is a thetan that will attach to your body. And that's kind of you. And so that's you. But at the same time, you might have thousands of other thetans, hundreds, thousands, whatever, that attach to your body as well. And one major goal of Scientology is to clear your body of all of those Thetans. And so instead of being driven by the wrong desires of those Thetans that, sort of weigh you down, you kind of want to exercise, that's not the word they use, but you want to rid those from your body, so that way you can be a fully clear, operating Thetan, that you have control of what's going on. And there you go. So that is the great hidden knowledge of Scientology. Saved you over $100,000 and a lot of time right there. The upper level people, if you ask, like outright, ask some of the upper level people in Scientology about this story, they will tell you you are crazy. It's like, no, why would we believe that? That's a crazy story. And that's what they're told. They're told to tell everyone else if they're asked by a non-Scientologist or even a lower level Scientologist. It's like, nah. And there's a lot of deception that is approved of in the religion, which is it's really, really interesting how that works. Any questions about any of that?
So in the book, you see a lot of language that doesn't fit with any of the other religions that we've looked at, but does fit with Fortune 500 companies. It seems
It's true.
a lot more like we're talking about an enterprise than a
Yeah, and that's kind of what happened. Aaron.
Well, I was going to say you all file tax exempt status in Scientology.
Yes.
Follow where it has I looked it up. As closest in 1967, lost their tax exempt status as a religious organization.
Yes. Yep.
And in 93, it was created. The lawsuits were settling between the IRS and Scientology on the tax exempt status. And there's a clip on YouTube where Miscavige, how you pronounce his name, announced to the gathering, I guess an annual gathering of Scientologists, when I guess the decision had been made that we got the tax exempt status back.
Yeah.
And you stand on stage yelling, the Lord, the Lord, the Lord. And
Yeah. I saw that one, and it's interesting. So the IRS thing. Did you? Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say in the beginning, LRH tried, what I've heard, he tried to go to different countries, and everywhere he went, like the IRS or whatever, they're like, you know something. And so he took all of his followers out of D.C. on a big ship. So he could escape all of that. And I forget how they eventually made it back to the United States. But, I mean, just the thinking, I mean, that's not what it really sounds for a person.
It's true. It's true. And as far as that goes, trying to dodge all of the IRS stuff. That's what he formed the Sea organization. They call it the Sea Org. That's still a thing now. And if you remember the Sea Org, you're looked at as like really dedicated to the Church of Scientology. And every Sea Org member signs a contract for 1 billion years of service. And they're paid somewhere in the ballpark of 4 to 60 cents per hour, I think is the going rate. And they are, it's his time in the Navy that really influenced how he ran that and how he set that up. But it does seem like that was a way to try to get around the IRS regulations. That thing with the IRS, I think, and the reason that I'm telling you all that, it's not just like, here's some trivia. But I think this shows the corruption within that church. It's hard for me to call them a church. It really is, because the religion seems to be not related. But their dealings with the IRS, Warren Hubbard was really trying to get away from that, so that's why he created the Sea Org. But at one point, they convinced a lot of their members to go to war. And that means that they would file lawsuits against the IRS. And they would file lawsuits against the IRS as a whole, against individual members of the IRS, And so they had about 2,500 lawsuits that were active for a little over 20 years, remember how long that was. And it was just like a nightmare trying to go through all of those things because they had individual Scientology members suing individual, and it was just a lot of mess, a lot of headache. And what ended up happening in 1993 is there was a meeting of David Miscavige and some of the higher up Scientology people with the IRS, and they were like, listen, if you grant us the tax exempt status, then we'll drop all of these lawsuits, all 2,500. They'll be gone overnight. And I mean, you see what happened. So it seems like that. And once you get tax exempt status, it's hard to revoke that. And that status also frees up a lot of First Amendment rights. And there's a lot of things that you can do in the name of Scientology that government officials can't really interfere with. And so there's a lot of stuff to look at with that. The current leader, David Miscavige, if you listen, his father left the Church of Scientology and openly speaks out against his son. His wife has been missing since 2007 or 2009, and there's huge controversy over that. You could look into that a little bit. But it's just, there's a lot of things to unwrap with that. So if you're curious about any of that, feel free to look into it. Yeah? Yes. Yes.
She grew up in it. Her parents were Scientologists, and so she was steeped in it, growing up all through it. And she not only didn't walk away from it,
Right.
she has some interesting tales about it.
Very much so. Yeah, and Leah Remini, she's the one who has I think there's 3 seasons on Netflix. And there's yeah. Right. And yeah, that's really interesting. She's one of the leading.
I listened to by the Miscavige is niece, and she's less Scientology. It's called Beyond Belief. It was really interesting, and it goes through like her childhood with Scientology with her parents at SeaWorld.
Wow.
It's a good listen. So,
That is okay. Very true. Beyond belief. That's interesting.
yeah, they have like a school, but it's like a work camp type thing.
Yeah.
It's insane. Like,
It is.
you get to see them like maybe once a month, once every 2 months or something.
Right. And that's one criticism that a lot of people who have left the church have mentioned, just the relationship of parents to children and all that. One of the dynamics, remember, was family. But they're very much against, if you are a dedicated member, you're not going to let your family get in your way of, doing what you need to do. There's stories of if people are thinking about leaving Scientology or they're starting to speak out against Scientology, they have these rehabilitation places, and there's like one of the top floor, I think like the 7th floor of the Church of Scientology building in Clearwater. They will send you for rehabilitation. It's kind of reindoctrination, trying to get you back into it so you'll stop questioning things.
We also have some shrinkages and medical interventions and lack thereof.
True.
Big into diet and vitamins and things like that is the end all be all for everything.
Yes.
And with John Travolta, his wife was Scientologist, she was Tony Brown,
Mm.
and she died of breast cancer a few years ago. And I guess they not go the Scientology route and trying to treat cancer, and it's
Yeah.
created some
Controversy.
and some issues.
Right. I didn't know that. That's really interesting, actually. Yeah, the healthcare thing, there's a lot of different areas where the church sort of has its hand, and they're doing different things. The statement here, today the church is into healthcare, drug treatment programs, banking, and the stock market. Interesting connections there. But the healthcare and drug treatment, you can imagine a lot of, especially lower level members of Scientology, might be like, well, hey, this is awesome. See what Scientology is doing, and see why they're so great, because they're trying to make a difference in healthcare and treatment of things, and that's amazing. But when it comes to those moments, when you're in the moment, and it's like, we have this treatment that could potentially save your life. What are they going to do, and where are you going to go with that? I will say this before we go. Scientologist source of authority, the writings of L. Ron Hubbard. That's what their sacred scripture is, and he's quoted as saying a lot of it comes from the Vedic literature, which, if you remember our study of Hinduism, I could not remember the name. Hinduism, that was where a lot of that came from, actually, and so you have a lot of that. You have some Buddhism in there. We'll talk more specifically on Wednesday, Lord willing, about some of those practices and what that looks like reincarnation. They do have a concept of that. What the process of being clear, how that corresponds to reaching enlightenment or Buddhahood, or nirvana. It's very, very similar. And I think Wednesday, it'll be good if we could focus on, if we are talking to someone in Scientology, and you only have a short period of time to do it, what do you say? How do you bring that up? And it's hard sometimes to try to think logically and try to help them think logically about this. But there's some things I think we can do, hopefully, that would help. And maybe, we'll see if we have time on Wednesday. I doubt we will have much of this. But we'll see if we can just flash back to some of the things that we've talked about throughout the course of this unit, this term. Quarter, that's the word. Yep. Yeah, that's what we call it. But that is just what I got so far. Any questions, comments, thoughts? Scientology up to this point? Promise there's a reason we're going through this. And again, it's not just so you have trivia knowledge or can enjoy all of the interviews, which it has been interesting in researching this. You watch a lot of interviews and a lot of talk show appearances and all kinds of things. But that's all I got for you. If nothing else, I will see you guys, Lord willing, Wednesday.